Do you want to sleep? Then listen to me. Turn off the lights, close the windows, now close them and listen to you. Finally, I will make a request to you. Put down your phone and listen to my voice. Listen clearly. I will now tell you a story that will make you sleepy. Close your eyes and listen carefully to my words.
For most people today, the word Tartaria sounds like fantasy, something halfway between a medieval legend and an internet conspiracy. Yet for centuries, it was neither obscure nor imaginary. It appeared plainly on European maps, in encyclopedias, travel accounts, and royal correspondence. Tartaria was not described as a single city or empire in the modern sense, but as a vast region stretching across much of northern and central Asia, from the edges of Eastern Europe through Siberia and into parts of Central Asia. And then, almost without ceremony, it disappeared. To understand why Tartaria fascinates so many researchers today, we must begin with a simple, unsettling question. How does something so widely documented simply vanish from history? In maps from the 16th to the 18th centuries, Tartaria is everywhere. Great Tartary, Independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and Russian Tartary are clearly labeled. These were not fringe maps drawn by amateurs. They were produced by respected cartographers working for kings, empires, and scientific societies. In an era when map-making was expensive, dangerous, and closely tied to state power, names were not added casually. Tartaria was acknowledged, recognized, and treated as real. Yet modern history books rarely mention it. When they do, Tartaria is reduced to a vague term used by Europeans to describe lands they did not fully understand, inhabited by Tatars or nomadic peoples. This explanation seems neat, but it does not fully explain the scale, consistency, and authority with which Tartaria was depicted for hundreds of years. The people labeled as Tatars themselves complicate the story. The term was used broadly, often incorrectly, to describe many different cultures, languages, and societies. Some were nomadic, yes, but many were settled, organized, and technologically capable. Historical accounts describe cities, trade networks, advanced horsemanship, metalworking, and administrative systems that do not fit the image of scattered, primitive tribes. This raises the first crack in the official narrative. If Tartaria was merely a vague name for unknown lands, why was it divided into regions? Why were borders drawn? Why were capitals, roads, and alliances implied in old texts? Empires are not usually invented by accident. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the name Tartaria begins to fade. As Russia expands eastward, as China consolidates control over its western territories, and as European powers refine their geopolitical maps, Tartaria is quietly replaced by new labels: Siberia, Central Asia, Manchuria, Kazakhstan, Mongolia. The land remains, the people remain, but the name, and whatever unity it once implied, is gone. This is where the idea of a cover-up enters the conversation. Some researchers argue that Tartaria was not just a geographic label, but a sophisticated civilization or confederation that rivaled European powers. According to this view, its erasure was intentional, tied to imperial expansion, rewritten histories, and the standardization of education in the 19th century. When new nation-states defined themselves, older narratives that did not fit were discarded. Other historians counter that there is no evidence of a single Tartarian empire, and that the disappearance of the name reflects improved geographic knowledge rather than suppression. They argue that as explorers gathered better data, broad medieval terms were replaced with precise regional names. From this perspective, Tartaria didn't fall, it was simply redefined out of existence. But here is the uncomfortable truth. History is written by systems of power, not by neutral observers. What is taught is not everything that happened, but what survives political, cultural, and institutional filters. When archives are reorganized, when terminology changes, and when generations are educated with new frameworks, entire worlds can fade into obscurity without a single dramatic act of destruction. Chapter 1 does not claim to prove that Tartaria was a lost global empire, nor does it dismiss the idea outright. Instead, it establishes the mystery itself is real. Tartaria existed in the historical record. Its sudden disappearance is undeniable. Whether that disappearance was the result of deliberate suppression, gradual reclassification, or something more complex lies at the heart of this investigation. In the chapters ahead, we will examine the maps, the architecture, the technological anomalies, and the moments in history where the story seems to fracture. Because before we can uncover a cover-up, we must first admit that something important may have been forgotten, and forgotten on purpose or by design of history itself.
If Tartaria truly ruled vast lands, a simple question follows: where are its records? Official history offers a strangely convenient answer. Tartaria was never an empire at all, merely a vague label Europeans used for unknown lands in Central and Northern Asia, a cartographic placeholder, a misunderstanding. But when we look closer, that explanation begins to crack. The maps that refuse to disappear. From the 1500s through the early 1800s, hundreds of detailed maps, British, French, Dutch, Russian, clearly label enormous regions as Great Tartary, Independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Russian Tartary. These maps weren't crude guesses. They showed defined borders, named cities, trade routes, political divisions. This wasn't how cartographers labeled unknown wilderness. This was how they marked recognized geopolitical entities. Even more puzzling, Tartaria often appears larger than the Roman Empire at its height. And then, almost overnight, it vanishes. By the mid-1800s, the word Tartary disappears from maps entirely, replaced by Russia, China, Mongolia, Central Asian republics. No announcement, no treaty, no record of collapse. Just gone. The silence of the history books. Empires leave trails, wars, rulers, coins, laws, architecture, revolutions. Yet modern textbooks mention Tartaria only in passing, or not at all. How does the largest land empire on Earth disappear without a final war, a last emperor, a documented fall? Rome collapsed loudly. The Ottomans dissolved publicly. The Mongols fragmented visibly. But Tartaria? It fades like erased chalk. The Mongol misdirection. Mainstream historians often fold Tartaria into the Mongol Empire, suggesting the term was a Western misunderstanding of Tartars. But this explanation raises uncomfortable questions. Why do maps distinguish between Mongols and Tartars? Why is Tartaria shown centuries after the Mongol Empire's decline? Why do Tartarian regions display urban infrastructure, not nomadic camps? Nomads do not build star fort cities, massive stone halls, advanced canal systems. Yet these structures exist across regions once labeled Tartaria. Who benefited from erasing Tartaria? By the 18th and 19th centuries, a new world order was forming, expanding European empires, centralized nation-states, standardized education systems, controlled historical narratives. A forgotten global civilization posed a problem. If Tartaria existed, history wasn't linear, progress wasn't Western-led, advanced societies existed outside accepted timelines. Erasing Tartaria simplified the story, and simplified stories are easier to control. A name that still haunts the past. Even after its removal from maps, traces linger. Old encyclopedias, travel journals, military records, church documents. They speak of Tartaria as real, present, and powerful. So why are we taught it was nothing? By the mid-19th century, something strange appears in the historical record. Cities across Europe, Asia, and the Americas suddenly emerge with massive stone buildings, ornate facades, and advanced infrastructure. Yet, official history claims they were built by newly settled societies with limited tools, limited labor, and little time. Even more unsettling, many of these structures appear to be partially buried. The buried world beneath our feet. Walk through old cities, Rome, Paris, St. Petersburg, Istanbul, Chicago, Boston, and you'll notice something odd. Windows that open below street level, doors that lead nowhere, entire floors underground, repurposed as basements. According to mainstream explanations, this happened due to rising street levels, renovations, poor planning. But this explanation fails when the same phenomenon appears globally across different climates, cultures, and continents, often dating to the same period. This has led researchers to propose a far more unsettling idea: a global catastrophe buried in earlier civilization under meters of earth and debris. The mud flood hypothesis. The theory suggests sometime between the late 1700s and mid-1800s, a massive event occurred. Not a typical flood of water, but a liquefied soil event, a slurry of mud, clay, ash, and debris sweeping across continents, burying cities almost instantly. Evidence cited includes buildings with uniform burial depth, sudden abandonment of advanced structures, historical photographs showing cities mid-excavation, missing documentation of construction phases. In many cases, cities appear to be dug out, not built up. Orphan trains in the reset of humanity. After this period, another mystery emerges. Between the 1850s and early 1900s, millions of children, especially in North America, were relocated through what became known as the orphan train movement. Officially, these children were victims of poverty and disease, but alternative historians ask, why were there so many orphans at once? Where did the parents go? Why were vast, empty cities already waiting for inhabitants? Some believe these children were repopulating cities after a catastrophic reset, assigned new identities, languages, and histories. The rewriting of time. Following the alleged catastrophe, history itself seems to change tone. Architecture becomes simpler, materials shift from stone and brick to steel and concrete, decorative grandeur fades, knowledge fragments into specialized disciplines. World fairs, like those in Chicago in 1983 and St. Louis in 1904, displayed immense palace-like structures said to be temporary, yet photographs show buildings that look anything but temporary. Critics ask, if these were truly temporary, why don't we see similar feats replicated today at the same scale and speed? Who benefited from the reset? If a civilization like Tartaria existed and fell, its disappearance would leave empty land, advanced infrastructure, a population gap, a chance to redefine power. Nation-states emerge rapidly. Borders are drawn, histories are standardized, education systems are centralized. A new narrative takes hold, one that begins after the catastrophe, not before it. A civilization without graves. One of the haunting questions remains: where are the graves? If Tartaria never existed, why do we lack construction records, labor logs, transitional architecture, burial evidence from millions of workers? And if it did exist, was it erased not by time, but by design?
If Tartaria truly existed, then its disappearance could not have been gradual. Civilizations do not vanish cleanly. They leave scars, ruins, inconsistencies, questions that refuse to stay buried. And in this chapter, we confront the most unsettling theory of all, the mud flood. Cities that should not exist. Across Europe, Russia, Asia, and even North America, countless old buildings share a strange feature. Their lower floors are buried. Doorways that open into solid ground, windows below street level, entire floors entombed beneath layers of compacted earth. Official explanations insist this was due to urban development or rising street levels, but the evidence doesn't align. In many cases, the buried layers are uniform, stretching across entire cities, sometimes continents. Excavations in Moscow, Rome, Paris, Chicago, and Istanbul revealed the same phenomenon: a sudden, thick layer of mud covering structures that were clearly once at ground level. This wasn't slow sediment buildup, it was catastrophic. A disaster without a name. Strangely, no official history records a global mud-based catastrophe between the 1600s and 1800s, yet the physical evidence suggests exactly that. Entire cities appear to have been reset. Above the mudline, buildings look crude, simplified, hastily repaired. Below it, architecture is refined, symmetrical, technologically advanced. In some structures, ornate stonework lies underground, massive arches are buried, advanced ventilation and heating systems are sealed off. If these buildings were always meant to be partially underground, why decorate them so lavishly? The only logical conclusion: they were not underground when built. The fate of Tartaria's people. If a mud flood occurred, it wasn't just a geological event, it was a civilizational extinction. The people of Tartaria, or whatever they truly called themselves, may not have survived in large numbers. Those who did would have emerged into a world reshaped, their knowledge fragmented, their cities destroyed. Children born after the event would grow up in ruins, unaware of what had been lost. And into that vacuum stepped new powers. The rise of the Reset Era. Immediately following the suspected mud flood timeline, we see sudden population booms, orphan trains, and unexplained child migrations, new governments forming rapidly, rewritten borders, new educational systems standardizing history. Millions of children with no clear ancestry appear in records across Europe and America. Officially, they were orphans. Unofficially, they may have been the last survivors of a forgotten world, reassigned new identities. This wasn't recovery, it was replacement. Why the mud flood was erased. A global catastrophe that wipes out an advanced civilization raises dangerous questions. Who survived? Who took control afterward? What knowledge was suppressed from preventing its return? If Tartaria had mastered free energy, advanced architecture, and harmonic technology, then erasing its memory would be essential to maintaining power. The mud flood wasn't just buried under soil, it was buried under education, maps, and official silence. The world above the mud. Today, we walk atop the remnants of something immense. Our cities are built on top of other cities. Our history books start after something went terribly wrong. Our ancestors may not be who we were told, and the deeper archaeologists dig, the more uncomfortable the questions become. If Tartaria fell in a single catastrophic event, then what caused it? And more importantly, by the early 1800s, Tartaria was no longer named openly, but it was not yet gone. This chapter begins where official history grows strangely vague. A war with no name. Across Europe and Asia, the early 19th century is described as an era of revolutions, Napoleonic wars, and nation-building. Yet when you look closely, a pattern emerges that does not fit conventional explanations. Entire cities were emptied, rebuilt, or modernized within a single generation. Architectural styles suddenly became uniform, borders were redrawn with suspicious precision, and millions died in conflicts whose motives remain unclear. What if these wars were not just political struggles, but the final dismantling of Tartaria? Unlike modern wars,
Wars, this conflict left behind no clear declaration, no single enemy, and no unified narrative. Instead, it appears fragmented across dozens of regional uprisings and reforms. But fragments, when assembled, reveal intent. Napoleon, conqueror or cleaner? Napoleon Bonaparte is portrayed as a military genius seeking empire, but his campaigns show a strange fixation. He marched east, deep into regions once marked as Tartarian. He targeted ancient cities, not just capitals. He looted archives, monasteries, and libraries, not just gold. In Moscow, the story claims the city mysteriously burned itself, yet eyewitness accounts describe already abandoned districts, vast stone buildings with no inhabitants, and infrastructure far beyond what 19th century Russia supposedly possessed. Why would a primitive empire need such monumental construction? Because it didn't build it. The Mud Flood event. Across Europe, Russia, China, and even North America, archaeologists and urban explorers have noticed the same anomaly. Buildings buried 1 to 3 stories underground, windows below ground level, doors that open into solid earth, entire cities built on top of older, identical cities. Mainstream historians attribute this to poor planning or rising street levels. But this explanation collapses under scale. This was not gradual, it was sudden, and it was global. Supporters of the Tartaria theory argue this was the result of a catastrophic event, possibly triggered during warfare, an event so destructive it wiped out infrastructure, populations, and records simultaneously. And what survives a catastrophe? Those prepared for it. Population reset. One of the strangest mysteries of the 19th century is population replacement. After wars and disasters, regions once densely populated are suddenly resettled by peasants, prisoners, and migrants with no memory of the cities they now inhabit. Official explanations claim the cities were new, the buildings were recent, the technology was imported. But the people living there could not explain who built the sewer systems, why buildings were so massive, why structures contained advanced ventilation, acoustics, and heating systems. They were inheriting something, not creating it. The burning of the past. Following this era, something unprecedented happened. Old maps were withdrawn, encyclopedias were rewritten, architectural timelines were compressed, new national histories were invented, institutions emerged to standardize knowledge, schools, registries, museums, and academies, ensuring that future generations would learn only the approved version. Tartaria did not vanish in battle, it vanished in curriculum. Why Tartaria had to be forgotten? A civilization that mastered free energy, harmonious urban design, global cooperation without centralized rule could not be allowed to exist as memory, because its existence would expose modern power structures as inheritors, not innovators. The wars of the 1800s were not about empire. They were about ownership of the world that survived Tartaria's fall. By the early 1800s, Tartaria was no longer named openly, but it was not yet gone. This chapter begins where official history grows strangely vague, a war with no name. Across Europe and Asia, the early 19th century is described as an era of revolutions, Napoleonic wars, and nation-building. Yet when you look closely, a pattern emerges that does not fit conventional explanations. Entire cities were emptied, rebuilt, or modernized within a single generation. Architectural styles suddenly became uniform. Borders were redrawn with suspicious precision, and millions died in conflicts whose motives remain unclear. What if these wars were not just political struggles, but the final dismantling of Tartaria? Unlike modern wars, This conflict left behind no clear declaration, no single enemy, and no unified narrative. Instead, it appears fragmented across dozens of regional uprisings and reforms. But fragments, when assembled, reveal intent. Napoleon, conqueror or cleaner? Napoleon Bonaparte is portrayed as a military genius seeking empire, but his campaigns show a strange fixation. He marched east, deep into regions once marked as Tartarian. He targeted ancient cities, not just capitals. He looted archives, monasteries, and libraries, not just gold. In Moscow, the story claims the city mysteriously burned itself, yet eyewitness accounts describe already abandoned districts, vast stone buildings with no inhabitants, and infrastructure far beyond what 19th century Russia supposedly possessed. Why would a primitive empire need such monumental construction? Because it didn't build it. The mud flood event. Across Europe, Russia, China, and even North America, archaeologists and urban explorers have noticed the same anomaly. Buildings buried 1 to 3 stories underground, windows below ground level, doors that open into solid earth, entire cities built on top of older identical cities. Mainstream historians attribute this to poor planning or rising street levels, but this explanation collapses under scale. This was not gradual, it was sudden, and it was global. Supporters of the Tartaria theory argue this was the result of a catastrophic event, possibly triggered during warfare, an event so destructive it wiped out infrastructure, populations, and records simultaneously. And what survives a catastrophe? Those prepared for it. Population reset. One of the strangest mysteries of the 19th century is population replacement. After wars and disasters, regions once densely populated are suddenly resettled by peasants, prisoners, and migrants with no memory of the cities they now inhabit. Official explanations claim the cities were new, the buildings were recent, the technology was imported, but the people living there could not explain who built the sewer systems, why buildings were so massive, why structures contained advanced ventilation, acoustics, and heating systems. They were inheriting something, not creating it. The burning of the past. Following this era, something unprecedented happened. Old maps were withdrawn, encyclopedias were rewritten, architectural timelines were compressed, and new national histories were invented. Institutions emerged to standardize knowledge, schools, registries, museums, and academies, ensuring that future generations would learn only the approved version. Tartaria did not vanish in battle, it vanished in curricula. Why Tartaria had to be forgotten? A civilization that mastered free energy, harmonious urban design, global cooperation without centralized rule could not be allowed to exist as memory, because its existence would expose modern power structures as inheritors, not innovators. The wars of the 1800s were not about empire, they were about ownership of the world that survived Tartaria's fall.
At the heart of Tartaria lore lies the mud flood. Old photographs from the 18th and 19th centuries show buildings partially buried, windows below ground level, doors opening into earth, grand structures sunken as if the ground had swallowed them whole. From St. Petersburg to Chicago, Rome to Istanbul, the pattern repeats. The official explanation? Urban development, rising street levels, renovations. The alternative explanation? A cataclysmic event, a massive flood of mud and debris that buried cities worldwide in a short span of time. Tartaria proponents argue the scale is too consistent to be coincidence. The speed of rebuilding was impossible with 19th century tools. Many basements were once full floors. If true, the world didn't rebuild these cities, it inherited them.
orphan trains and lost generations. Between 1854 and 1929, more than 200,000 children were relocated across the United States on what history calls the orphan trains. Officially, they were homeless children from overcrowded cities, but Tartaria theorists ask an uncomfortable question. Where did so many orphans come from so suddenly? Were they survivors of a forgotten catastrophe? Children from a previous civilization absorbed into a newly rewritten society? Records are vague, names were changed, origins erased. A generation appeared with no clear past. World fairs, showcases of a forgotten age. Then came the World Fairs. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair displayed immense buildings, palaces of stone, domes and towers and canals constructed in an impossibly short time. Officially, they were made of staff, a temporary plaster-like material, yet photographs suggest otherwise. Stone textures, intricate carvings, massive foundations. After the fairs ended, many of these structures were demolished. Why destroy something so magnificent? Tartaria theorists believe the fairs weren't exhibitions of progress, but introductions, a controlled reveal of inherited Tartarian architecture framed as modern achievement. A new history for a new world. After this supposed reset, calendars were standardized, education systems rewritten, architecture rebranded, nations redefined. The term Tartaria vanished, replaced with smaller regions and modern states. History, once vast and mysterious, became linear and manageable. According to the theory, this wasn't accidental, it was administrative, a simplified past for a repopulated world. The silence that followed. No official record describes a global catastrophe. No textbook mentions reset. No monument commemorates the loss. Only fragments remain. Old maps, photographs with no explanation, buildings that seem older than their histories. In questions, history does not answer.